The format really is Karen and Rick will make a number of comments, in particular recap of our budget discussions today. I'll do the whole of last week and this week, and then we will follow up with a session of question and answers. So we've got until 11 o'clock to try and run through our presentation and then give the press ample opportunity to ask as many questions as you may have. Thank you. Karen.
Okay, thank you, Cato. First of all, just to start with the objective of the mission. We were here to do two things. First, to conduct a review of budget performance in this financial year, 2012, and second, to assess the need for budget aid in the next 3 years, covering 12-13, 13-14 and 14-15. It's good, though, to start with the context this visit sits within. We were preceded by a visit by our Minister of State in December, Alan Duncan, also our Director General, Joy Hutchin, and our Deputy Director for the Overseas Territories, Ian McKendry. It's worth reminding ourselves what the Minister emphasised during his visit. First of all, the British Government takes its responsibilities to the Overseas Territories seriously, and in Montserrat he emphasised its commitment to the island's long-term development by making investments that would catalyse growth. Secondly, he announced DFID was in principle willing to commit public funds to geothermal exploration, but the possibilities of private sector funding would also have to be explored. He confirmed that DFID would make a payment of 4.2 million UK pounds, which is, I think, just over 17 million EC dollars, to clear in full the outstanding government arrears to the Social Security Fund. That's Montserrat government arrears, not UK government. This has now been done and will help to ensure a basic standard of living for the pensioners. Thirdly, he emphasised that if the UK is to provide technical support and capital investment, it has to go hand in hand with progress on implementing commitments under the Strategic Growth Plan, and evidence that the Government of Montserrat is minimising waste and maximising productivity and performance. This is particularly important in ensuring continued support of the UK public in the context of an austere economy. I'm now going to hand over to Rick, who will take us through the detail of the budget discussions over the last week. Thank you.
Thank you, Karen. The purpose of our visit, as Karen has said, was to do a review of progress in this financial year, 2011-12, and also to look at government's priorities and commitments for the next financial year, with a view to determining our level of budgetary support for the next financial year, and also for the years 2013-14 and 2014-15. So, just to focus now on this financial year, and then I'll take you forward through our discussions for future years. At the beginning of 2011, the Government of Montserrat expected real economic growth to stagnate, following a contraction of about 5% in 2010. When we were here in September last year, this revision for economic growth was, this estimate was revised up to about 2.3% for the year, and during this review, the Government of Montserrat further revised that estimate of economic growth up to about 4.7%. So, having expected economic growth to be, roughly zero, it now appears to have been much stronger than they had expected. Despite that, this relatively strong economic growth in this year, much higher than expected, domestic revenue performance has so far been disappointing. Having forecast domestic revenue of $45 million, the Government of Montserrat are now expecting revenue in the region of $40 million. This is a reduction of about 11%. from discussions with the Revenue Authority, it appears that the revenue shortfall can largely be explained by poor compliance. In addition, the collection of tax arrears has failed to deliver significant returns, although some progress has been made in this area during the last year. The Government of Montserrat have accommodated this reduction in revenue by constraining expenditure. This has largely come from unfilled vacancies across the civil service and efforts by the relevant ministerial accounting officers to constrain expenditure. This effort to constrain expenditure is commendable. One final point on this budget year are the significant levels of outstanding and unbudgeted arrears. And this is an area which we are working with the Government of Montserrat to identify ways to reduce these arrears. So with regards to a recommendation for the end of this financial year, we note the current drop in domestic revenue, but yet we are also pleased to see the efforts that the Revenue Authority, the MCRS, are putting in place to address this and to address the issue of non-compliance and really make an effort with their new director to tackle this issue. And we support their intentions to take action over the next couple of months to increase the revenue above their estimate of 40 million. Looking now to the future, the Government of Montserrat presented us with their forecast for economic growth for the next, for 2012. And they are expecting the economy to grow by about 4.2% during the next year. The main sectors for growth are continue to be construction, but also they are optimistic about the prospects of increased agricultural performance and also tourism. Not least because, as you all know, this year marks the 50th anniversary of Montserrat's Festival in December, and it is likely that this will attract significant numbers of tourists and returnees from abroad. So this is something which will make a contribution to Montserrat's growth this year. Government of Montserrat are also forecasting for this economic growth to continue in 2013-14 and 14-15. In 2013, they're estimating growth to be about 2.4%, and in 2014, they're estimating it to grow slightly to 2.8%. Given the prospect of significant investment in the Little Bay area and the port, as well as geothermal energy on the island, we expect these growth projections to be to turn out to be relatively conservative. We have had a series of long and detailed discussions with the Government of Montserrat about their expenditure projections and their revenue projections for this next financial year. We have noted that their current fiscal position is unsustainable and will require serious decisions and prioritisation by Cabinet and by the line ministries to balance their budget. Government of Montserrat have already identified a number of areas where we agree they can make significant cost savings during the next financial year. These include a revision of efforts to review the civil service pension scheme. An actuarial review of the civil service pension scheme will be conducted in the very near future, and the recommendations will need to be implemented from this review to mitigate the short and long-term exposure. The Government of Montserrat have also made a series of commitments on outsourcing of various government activities to the private sector. And we are also recommending that they look further at their membership and payments to regional bodies and initiatives to ensure that these are essential and that they represent good value for money. Our recommendation to the Government of Montserrat is that any savings that they realise through doing this set of reforms, these sets of initiatives, should be reallocated during the financial year to their spending priorities. And given the evidence we've received from the Government of Montserrat, it seems that some of the areas that they might want to consider for these savings should be in the areas social sector in particular, housing, social welfare, education and health. We are also clear that maintenance is another area which deserves prioritisation during the coming year. So, just to summarise where we've got to. Government of Montserrat estimates for revenue appear not to have been delivered upon during this financial year, and they are making efforts to address that, and we commend them for that. On the other side of the equation, on expenditures, they've made good progress at restraining expenditure, so to keep it in line with what is budgeted. For the next financial year, the Government of Montserrat have made a series of commitments in terms of identifying areas for savings, and we will be monitoring very closely their performance in this area. This is important not only to improve efficiency within the Government of Montserrat, but also it will help to demonstrate to our government that the Government of Montserrat is delivering value for money in terms of both the Government of Montserrat's taxpayers and also UK taxpayers. We will continue to monitor these commitments during the next 6 months and as the years progress. Progress on these indicators and these commitments will be key triggers in terms of UK commitments to invest public funds in capital projects over the next 3 years. These capital projects with which we've been working with the Government of Montserrat and which were identified previously, I'm sure you're all aware, relate to geothermal energy, Little Bay Town and Port, and issues relating to access. Government of Montserrat are finalising their revenue projections and their expenditures for the next financial year, and once we have received these final revenue and expenditure projections, we will take a decision on how much budget support or budgetary aid is required for the next financial year and for subsequent years. We expect to be back again in September for a mid-year review of the budgetary aid, the budget process, and that will be our time to reflect on what progress has been made since this visit and to review government progress against the commitments that it's made to make those efficiency savings.
When I hear you say, for example, that we have to wait for some of these expenditure projections to be sorted out, then you'll agree to the budgetary support. In other words, I'm understanding that as of now you cannot tell us what budgetary support you'll be giving to Montserrat. Am I correct with that?
You
for 2012-13.
So we have had a series of discussions with the government. They presented to us their draft estimates for expenditure and revenue projections for the next financial year. Now, it was a really good opportunity for us to review and to go through in detail what their revenue projections are for each of the different types of taxes and see whether adjustments needed to be made and to make sure there was some consistency within the government's figures. And whilst doing that, the Government of Montserrat have identified a number of areas where they want to make revisions to their revenue projections. Now, as you know, our budgetary aid is there to basically cover the gap between domestic revenue and the government's expenditures. Now, whilst they are making their revisions on the revenue side and also on the expenditure side, it's impossible at the moment to define exactly what that financing gap is, and therefore not possible at the moment to announce what level of support is needed. However, we've had some great discussions. The government are finalising their projections, and we hope in the near future to have a figure that we can then confirm.
Yeah. Specifically going towards the revenue shortfall from 2011, 2012, which you said was due almost to the tax arrears and non-compliance. I think that's where the shortfall. Was there any thought given to the fact that there were problems and that perhaps the revenue estimates were just simply wrong and not achievable? Because I noticed you still put in some emphasis on that.
I think it's important. The budget, as set out by the government at the beginning of the financial year, sets out their plans. And it is their best guess, their best forecast for the year. None of us can predict accurately or precisely how revenue will go through that year or how expenditures will progress. Especially economists, yes. However, when the projections were made at the beginning of the financial year, it was on the basis that the economy would stagnate, that there would be relatively little growth in the economy. Now, as you know, if growth in the economy is higher than projected, then you might expect more imports, you might expect company profits to be higher, you might expect income to be slightly better, and so on. Or exports might be higher than expected. So, having made your projections at the beginning of the year, if you find things are going better, then you would expect revenue to be going up as well. So, I think it's important to always refer back to what your initial estimates were, and are things going in the right direction, or are steps needed to ensure that to get back on track? And that's what we've been discussing just at the moment with the government. It seems that revenues are lower than they had expected, but I understand the Revenue Authority have got some clear steps that they're going to be taking in order to ensure that compliance is increased and that revenue gets back towards where it was estimated to be.
Compliance, and that was my question. What is the compliance you're referring to?
So that means that taxpayers are paying what they should be paying. That's the issue with regards to compliance.
So are we talking primarily about income tax?
It's on a range of different taxes. You're aware that the Revenue Authority has a new director who's come in, and he has already identified a series of measures that he's going to be putting in place. I won't talk to them now. I think he might take the opportunity to explain them a bit more once he's had a chance to settle into his job. I know he's got some great ideas, and we are supporting him and encouraging the government, the Revenue Authority, to take measures to improve compliance over the next few months, and then also into the next financial